Hi everyone, Deb Tucker here from Studio 180 Design. Today we're going to take your Wedge Star blocks and we're going to give them a new twist. Oh, how cool is this? So what we're going to do today in this video is I'm going to walk you through the steps for our technique sheet that we call Twisted Wedge. There are a couple things you're going to want to have with you in order to be able to make this beautiful type of block that you see here and also that you see in the quilt behind me. First thing, you're going to need the Wedge Star tool, obviously. You're going to need the Twisted Wedge technique sheet. I'm also going to point you toward our free downloads page and have you download the chart. All of this information is in this set of instructions, but the chart at the free downloads is going to be a little bit easier to manipulate when you're working. And if you happen to be left-handed, while you're at our website, take a few minutes and download the left-hand cutting instructions so you can have easy reference to those. So the first thing I do before I get started with the construction process is to determine what size block I want to make. For an 11-inch block, when I consult the chart on the technique sheet, it gives me all the information that I need. I'm going to need to cut 4 different strips to make all the different parts of the twisted wedge block. For the outer points, I need to cut strips that are 1.5 inches. For the inner points, I'm going to cut that strip 1 3/4 inches. They're not the same, but they're close. For the wedges that surround the diamond, that strip needs to be cut 4 inches. And for those corner squares, you are going to need to refer to that set of instructions that I had you download from our website. This is the chart from the Wedge Star tool, and for the 11-inch block, it tells me that I need to cut those squares that will become the corner triangles at 4 3/4 inches. Okay, after you've cut your strips, the instructions have you cutting the shapes that we would normally use when we do a wedge star, the small wedges and the corner triangles. And I'm going to review those just briefly here, but if this is too quick for you, go back to the regular instructions that came with the tool, and that will get you going along that path. But it's just like we've done before. This is a 4-inch strip, so what I'm looking for is the 4-inch horizontal line that's on there, and there's a little line up at the top that ensures that you have the right size strip. You're going to make 2 cuts, 1 up, 1 down. That's going to give you 1 pair of the wedges. You've got a choice. You can either rotate the tool, or what I often do is I just flip the strip over so I can keep the tool in the same direction, put the 4-inch line on the bottom, the little line at the top, and cut your wedges. And of course, if you've done the Wedge Star before, you know you need 8 of these pairs in order to be able to make your blocks. Now, as far as those corner squares go, from that 4 3/4 inch block, basically what you're going to do, you need 2 squares. They need to be cut 4 3/4 since it's a 4 3/4 inch strip. Once it's cut, you cut it in half, and that's all there is to cutting the corners to finish off your blocks. So when it comes to the strip piecing, we're going to put the strips together with a 1/4 inch seam, but we're going to stagger the edges. And depending on how you do the staggering, it's going to give you 2 different spin options to your blocks. And that's what I'm looking at when I'm talking about step number 4. If you look at the first diagram, for a left-hand spin on your block, what you're going to do is you're going to have strip number 2 on the bottom and strip number 1 on the top. And that's the inner point on the bottom and the outer point on the top. So that when you stitch and you work your way through the rest of the steps, your blocks are going to look like they're spinning left. There's another way, in case you want to change the spin, change the rotation on your block. And what you would do for that one is look at the right spin diagram. And for the right spin diagram, your strip number 1, your outer point, goes on the bottom, and your strip number 2 goes on the top, and the stagger looks like this. Since all of the instructions are written for the left spin and the diagrams, that's the one we're going to focus on. You will put the strip number 2, which is your inner strip, on the bottom. You're going to put your strip number 1 on top of it. So the little one is on top of the big one. And what you want to do is you want to stagger about the width of the strip. I just put a little fold down there. I would probably trim those salvages off, but stagger it about that much and proceed to stitch those strips with a good 1/4 inch seam. So here is our left spin strip set stitched with a 1/4 inch seam. Once it's stitched, you're going to press those seams, and we like to press those seams open to give you less bulk in the construction of your project. Now, once you've got them stitched and pressed, the next thing is going to be to subcut these apart. And if you've done the Wedge Star before, subcutting is going to kind of make sense here. You set up the strip set, if you're right-handed, horizontally in the mat in front of you. We're going to subcut at a 45-degree angle. We use the Wedge Star that has the 45-degree to set up that subcut. And what I like to do is put one of the lines or the edge of the tool on the edge of the strip, put an additional tool on the side, remove that, and make your cut. And there you've just established the 45-degree angle that you need for the subcutting. And again, if you haven't done the traditional Wedge Star ahead of time, this is the same thing that we do with the diamond strips in the Wedge Star process. You might want to go back and take a look at that, or try a simpler version rather than with the strips. But once I've set up my 45-degree angle, I'm going to remove the Wedge Star and come back and subcut. Now, what is the number that I subcut? For that number, you're going to go back to the chart. And my chart says, for my diamond subcut for an 11-inch block, I need to subcut at 2 3/4 inches. So I'm going to move the scrap out of the way. I'm going to set up a 2 3/4. 2 3/4 is just a little less than 3. Sometimes I'll go to the 3 and back it to 2 3/4. The other thing I like to do, if you have a ruler that has a 45-degree line on it, place that on that seam and proceed to work your way down the strip, cutting 2 3/4 inch sections out of your strip piece set. So there's the 3, back to 2 3/4, line up the guideline on the seam line, make your cut, and if you haven't figured it out already, you're going to need to make 8 of those in order to complete your block. Now, the next step in the process, again, should be very familiar. If you've worked with a tool before, you're going to set your small wedges on either side of your diamond. But be careful here. Remember, your diamond has 2 sides, and you don't want to set it up with that broader inner point strip near those wedges. You want to make sure that you put the outer point strip in between the 2 wedges. Like always, we're going to position the wedge on top of the diamond. We recommend that when you stitch, you turn the wedge shape over so that you're stitching with the diamond on top. That's going to give you this piece that you see right here. We also recommend when you press this, that you press that seam toward that diamond. That is a strip piece diamond, but still just a diamond, before you go on to add the next piece. When I do this, again, position the wedge, flip it over, stitch with the diamond on top. One of the things that I always do is I always do chain piecing when I'm constructing these. That's for efficiency purposes. The other thing, these are some hints that you might want to take note of. When I have a darker little triangle hanging over the edge, when I go to press this back into place, sometimes that dark triangle peeks through a light colored background or a light colored wedge. What I like to do is come back and remove that triangle so that when this becomes a wedge, a diamond wedge, I'm not seeing that bit of red fabric come through at the end. So chain piecing, get rid of the shadowing, and of course, make 8 so you can complete the block. So what I'm going to be showing you next is very familiar if you've already worked with the Wedge Star tool. This wedge is oversized, all 8 of them are. What you're going to be doing is using the diamond point guidelines that are on the wedge. We're making an 11-inch, so we're looking at the 11-inch guidelines that come down to the middle, and those guidelines are going to go onto the seam lines so that our trimming is going to make each wedge exactly the same size. Now, if you're right-handed, remember you tip a little bit to the right. If you happen to be left-handed, you want to tip that whole situation over to the left. But once you trim this down, it's going to standardize each wedge that you've made. There's not much there. Some of them have a little bit more, some of them have a little less. But each of those wedges is then going to be exactly the right size for you to go on and do the next part of the construction steps. And once your units are put together into pairs, the next step is to press them, and you have 2 options. One option is to press your pair in one direction. And I would always press it in the direction that you see on this one so that it's going the same direction as this seam, this one, and this one. They're all going in the same direction. Now, generally, I don't do that. Generally, when I'm putting 8 points together in the middle of the star, I like to press the seams open, but you have a choice and you can pick which will work for you. In either case, after I have put these together in pairs, I like to use either a regular ruler or my Tucker trimmer to clean up that edge. Just get rid of those dog ears and make sure that I have 4 nice 90-degree shapes, and you can already start to see what's happening. The block is coming together just like it does with our regular wedge stars. The 4 units will be put together. They're going to create an octagon. Generally, if I press that center seam open, then all the other seams are pressed open. If you press that seam going in one direction, then press all those seams going in that same direction around the middle. But when you're done, you are just a few short steps away from finishing your block. Here it is in the octagon form. We've already cut these corner triangles. They're going to be added, but remember, before we add the corners to our octagon, what we need to do is we need to trim that excess fabric that's built into the process so that we're getting a 1/4 inch raw edge from the sewn point. The easiest way to do that is to simply take those outside edge trim lines that are on the base of the tool, position them onto the seams that are already sewn, give it a cut. Now you have that edge ready to receive the oversized corner triangle. Once it's stitched, go ahead and press that out. It's the path of least resistance. So after you've added those oversized corners, remember, like all of our Wedge Star blocks, the whole thing is oversized, allowing you to come back with a square up tool and trim the entire block so that it will, just like that, measure exactly the right size, and in this case, 11.5 inches by 11.5 inches, and you're going to maintain all your points, and you're going to be so proud of these blocks, you're not going to be able to stop with just the 11-inch size. And of course, you don't have to, because the nice thing about this tool is that we've got lots of different sizes on there, 22 in all. One of the ones that I recently made was this size. Oh my gosh, that's the smallest that it will go. That's a 5-inch block right there. And if you get really adventuresome, maybe you want to consider making one of the larger blocks on this twisted wedge project. So run, do not walk to your local quilt shop, pick up your Wedge Star tool. out, pick up your Twisted Wedge Technique sheet. If you want the pattern for this quilt, it's called Hollywood Boulevard. If your shop doesn't have those items, you can come directly to us. We'll get them into your hands as soon as possible. And you can start making blocks that are going to knock everybody's socks off. So you take care, everybody. See you around somewhere. Good luck with all your future quilts.